So welcome to update 1.26, where we have a completely overhauled crew system, and it's simplified a lot of stuff, balanced it out quite a bit, but then also added a few kind of useless perks and also a few maybe controversial perks. Anyway, in this video, I'm going to be talking through the entire crew system, everything you need to know about this, and getting you up to speed so that you are just as familiar with this system as you would be with the last one. The reason why you're staring at a Type 5 Heavy right now is because it has every single crew member in that tank, so we can go through every single perk. First things first, once you're greeted to this screen, you'll see it is slightly different. You can only get 6 perks for each crew member, unless they share a role. For example, the T-57 Heavy, the Commander is also the Radar Operator. So once you earn your 6 perks, you also have 3 bonus perks. The way these bonus perks are leveled is by every 2 skills, it equates to 1 bonus perk. So if you level up Brothers in Arms 100%, that'll be 50% on situational awareness as I have here. Then once you earn repairs 100%, you then get 100% of situational awareness. But if you just have a normal Commander with no bonus skills, then this is what it will look like, and you choose your 6 perks. Once you've maxed out your crew skills and you've got 6 skills on every single person, or even if you just have 6 skills on 1 person, any XP you earn in the battle is then divided. This is obviously your crew XP that I'm talking about, and by default you earn normal XP in a battle and crew XP in a battle. That crew XP is then halved and then divided by however many crew members there are in the tank, and then that XP is moved into earning a crew book, which is a universal guide for the nation of that tank. So once you've maxed out your crew and you're playing one of your favorite tanks, for example, you can easily just go ahead and earn a lot of crew books. One thing to note is that if you are wanting to use our directive, you cannot cheese this by getting an extra crew skill. So for example, I have a 6 skill crew fully maxed out on my super conch. If I went into here and tried to pick camo, you would see that a directive has no effect because I've already selected the maximum amount of crews. So I cannot choose an extra perk here through a directive. You'll only be able to choose stuff that you've already chosen, and then it will get the bonus because it's already been maxed out to 100%. So now you understand this screen, how it all works. Let's now talk about the perks for each different person. Once you click any one of these, you'll then be greeted to the perk selection screen. Up the top here, you have the perks. 3 of them, Brothers in Arms, Repairs and Concealment, which you will need for each person in the tank to get the bonus total. So for example, if you want to have repair speed increase by 80%, you would have to have repairs on each one of these people maxed out, and then you get the bonus. Now, I'm not going to be going through each one of these every single time because I feel like you're intelligent enough to know whether or not you should put camo on a tank or repairs on a tank, or Brothers in Arms, which is Brothers in Arms should be a must on every single tank in the game. I think you're intelligent enough to know that. So I'm going to be mainly speaking about the actual perks for the people for the designation. So for the Commander, Recon, let's be honest, it's just a perk that everybody should take. It doesn't matter whether you're in a heavy tank, whether you're in a light tank, whether you're in a tank destroyer, take Recon. It gives you more view range. The other ones are not as important as Recon, in my opinion. What Recon does is increase the view range by 2%. Now, the problem with this is that 2% sounds like a very, very small number. However, 2% on a view range that is already at a lot higher will then be a lot bigger of a number. For example, this view range will go up to 420, up from 412 on the Type 5 Heavy, which you might say to yourself, oh, that's not really worth it. However, on a tank like the Manticore, which I've got to 500 view range just from having Brothers in Arms, situational awareness, and food, we then add view range, and it goes up to 511. So instead of just 8 meters, we're now gaining 11 meters. So the higher up number, you're obviously going to get a better result. So yes, in my opinion, doesn't matter. Always choose Recon on every single tank. Next up, we have Emergency. Now, this is a little bit more situational and mainly just for brawling tanks. There is a slight case that you might want to put it on a light tank. That is because if it's at the very end of the game and you know for a fact that you're going to go and YOLO something and you're going to take damage, you then get the extra bonus just from taking that damage, meaning that your view range will go up as well as every other crew skill. What emergency does is when fully trained, it increases the crew efficiency bonus by 5% for 15 seconds after taking damage from an enemy. Note, you cannot self-damage yourself. So you can't shoot yourself with artillery and get that reload time down. You cannot fall off of something and then take damage and then get emergency. It doesn't work like that. It has to be from an enemy vehicle. So for heavy tanks, like the Type 5, this is very, very useful. That extra 5% just for taking some damage is quite... It could actually be a matter of life or death in certain aspects, because if you do take damage and you're very low, and then you also combine it, say, with Adrenaline Rush as well, you're then getting a massive boost to your reload time and everything else. It can be very, very good. So yes, for brawling tanks, very good. Even for light tanks, because for light tanks, there's not too many other skills around here that I would say is that useful. Remember, you can pick 6 from this. So if you're already choosing, say, these 3 on a light tank, and yes, I would recommend repairs on a light tank. I don't care what light tank you think you are, you still need repairs, because if you do get tracked in the open, you then have a very, very fast repair crew. So repairs is, yes, 100% necessary for light tanks as well. But for the rest of them, remember, you have another 3 to pick from. Obviously, you're going to have recon. What would you choose for your other 2 from down here if it's not emergency? So even for light tanks, I would probably use it as the last skill, maybe. I still think that it's pretty useful, especially just for, as I said, if you're on Prokhorovka or something like that, and you know that you're going to just YOLO in, and you can take a hit, you suddenly get an extra 5% for 15 seconds. And that 15 seconds will last a hell of a long time when you're bombing it straight down their line towards the tank destroyers. So I do think emergency is useful. For tank destroyers, probably not, because if you're a sniping TD or something like that, then it's not really useful. Definitely not useful for artillery or anything like that. But for those situations that I've said, I think emergency is a good perk. Next up is Mentor. When fully trained, you increase the amount of XP earned for all crew members by 20%, and Jack of all trades has actually been merged into this. So you will also enable the commander to replace knocked out crew members with 65% effectiveness. So this means, when fully trained, if you have a gunner get knocked out, your commander can take over that role and be 65% effective at doing his role. And obviously with all the other bonuses, brothers in arms, food, vents, anything else that you can think of, that then goes up as well, including if you then get shot at by emergency, because it will buff the mentor perk, which then makes it even more effective at doing that role. The crew XP earned, however, is also useful for if you do have 6 crew skills, you are then earning 20% extra XP towards that crew book. So even when it's fully trained, this isn't a useless perk. And this is actually probably one of the better perks to have if you do want to just farm crew books with your favorite tank and your favorite crew. So I think Mentor, again, is a perk that most people should be choosing. I would choose it over Emergency, unless you're a very, very big brawling tank. In which case then Mentor after Emergency. I mean, the way that I would do it, if this was a heavy tank, I'd be choosing Brothers in Arms, Repairs, Recon, Emergency, then Mentor. And if it was a medium tank or something that would be useful to have camo, then I'd be choosing those 3, Recon, Emergency, and then Mentor. Next up is Coordination. When fully trained, increases the aiming speed by 12.5% for 15 seconds after you spot an enemy vehicle. Now, this does not need to be the first time spot. This can be any spot. If you spot an enemy, you will have better aim speed by 12.5% for 15 seconds. However, I don't really think that it's that useful. On some tanks, sure, you can probably use it. Maybe it will be useful. Maybe something like a Barask. This would actually be pretty ideal, maybe. I don't know. But I think for most tanks, there's better options within the rest of the perks. And I definitely wouldn't choose it over Mentor, Recon, Emergency, or even Practicality, to be honest with you. So I don't think that it's really a must-have, as there's better perks than it. For sound detection, issues an alert about an enemy SPG fire with a 0.1 second delay. This will also reduce the negative effects of stun by 10%. I think that this is pretty useless. It can be good. okay, to understand where the shot is coming from and when. However, if you have your sound up, you can hear the enemy SPG fire, and you can usually know if it's coming at you or not. With all the rest of these perks in here now, I don't think that sound detection is that useful. For me, I used to use sound detection when I kind of just ran out of perks to pick. It was never really... It was a nice to have, but not a necessity to have. So I don't think that it's really that useful at the moment in its current state. And 10% is nothing. Think about it. If you get stunned for 20 seconds, you're then getting stunned for 18 seconds instead. You're still getting stunned for quite a long time. And finally, practicality. This will decrease your consumable cooldown by 10%. And that just means you have a 90-second cooldown with your standard small repair kit. That will then become 81. So for the vast majority of tanks, I think that it's Brothers in Arms, repairs, recon, emergency, mentor, practicality. That's what I will choose for most of my tanks. If it needs camo, I'll either drop the practicality for concealment or maybe mentor. It really depends on the type of tank. Because if you're going to be brawling a lot, then practicality can be useful just to get that down. Although I'd then still rather just have mentor just to get the extra XP, and if my commander then can just take over one of the places, I feel like mentor would be even better. So I don't know. Listen, the thing is with practicality, I think everybody now are going to say, "Oh yeah, let's get everything down." No one really had many issues with the cooldown time of 90 seconds, and I think that people are now just going to choose it automatically just because they want even lower cooldown, which is fine, and you can choose that. But I mean, most of the time, you'll be okay. Like 90 seconds versus 79 seconds, which is what you can get it to if you have vents and stuff like that. Yeah, sure, it's 11 seconds difference, but are you really going to notice it that often? Next up, we have the gunner, and straight away, we have snapshot. Obviously, this is exactly the same as it used to be. It will decrease the gun dispersion while turning the turret by 7.5%. This is just a 100% choose it, right? It's just one of those things where it brings it down, it gets it to a more manageable level, unless you have absolutely god tier gun handling, which you can find out by just going onto a website like TanksGG and then looking at the soft stats. What you're looking for is the turret traverse dispersion. If that's below, say, 0.1, then you'll probably be okay without choosing this. But if it's usually the turret dispersion is not too bad. Usually you can get that down to like 0.06 or something like that for a lot of the Russian heavy tanks, for example. And although I might have made it sound like you don't necessarily need it, the thing is, it's better to have it than to not have it. And there's a lot of other perks in here which are not really suited for either heavy tanks or brawling tanks and stuff like that, that you can get rid of one of the others and then take it. So for the most tanks that you're going to be playing, you take snapshot. Next up is Deadeye, and this one got a buff. What it used to be was it would increase the chance of critically damaging modules in an enemy vehicle. But it was only with AP, APCR, and heat rounds. Now it is with all ammo types. So HE, HESH, all of that will now have an increased chance of damaging the modules in the vehicle. It will not cause more module damage. That is one thing I want to make very clear. It does not increase the module damage. It increases the chance of critically damaging modules. And it also does enemy crew members as well. So honestly, you don't necessarily need this. However, it's very funny to have, especially on, say, char MLEs, where they will do a stupid amount of module damage if they get a full clip out and they're aiming at an ammo rack, fuel tanks, engine, whatever it might be. Where for tanks like that, where you know that it already does very, very good module damage, pick this and you can aim for fuel tanks and usually set them alight within one shot. It's devastating sometimes. And not to mention that once you do get all the buffs, you get Brothers in Arms, Vents, all of the others, this then goes up even further, where you can almost, I think the highest you can get it to is about 3.8% chance, which is nearly 4% chance of just doing extra damage to crew members, modules, whatever it might be inside the tank. So yes, although not a 100% necessary one, definitely a fun one. Next up is Designated Target, and this also got Eagle Eye mixed into it. This increases the time before an enemy vehicle is no longer spotted inside the gunner's viewable area by 2 seconds. Now, when it says the gunner's viewable area, I believe it needs to be... Well, actually, it says the viewable area is defined by the plus minus 10 degree sector, 20 in total, in front of the vehicle's gun and its view range. So you need to be looking at the target, and as long as it's within 20 degrees either side, or 10 degrees either side, you're fine. It will then make it so that that vehicle that you're looking at is then spotted for an extra 2 seconds. And as I said, Eagle Eye has been mixed in with this, and it enables the identification of damaged modules with a 0.5 second delay. So all you have to do is look at the enemy vehicle, or even your friendly vehicle, and just hover over them, get their outline, wait 0.5 seconds, and it will tell you what modules are critically damaged. Again, not really useful for most vehicles, but for light tanks, a must-have with the extra 2 seconds, especially you just have to rotate your turret, look at them. You got an extra 2 seconds of them being spotted. Concentration. This decreases the gun dispersion by 3.5% when stationary. Now, you must wait 3 seconds before this perk gets activated. So you get into position, you wait 3 seconds, then you have 3.5% better aim dispersion. The only tanks that I would see this being useful for is obviously sniper TDs, but even then, a lot of them still won't really benefit from this because they'll still be moving around trying to get an angle. So each time that you then just shift your tank either left or right using your hull traverse, it will then interrupt it and you have to redo it again. The only one that I really see this being very, very useful is an STRV, which already gets absolutely insane accuracy. So then you're looking at that thinking, well, is that really worth it even on that? I think that this is kind of a bit of a gimmicky perk. I don't recommend anyone to really take this because the difference that you actually see is not actually that big. It's a very, very small amount. Unless you have something which has absolutely gigantic gun dispersion. Then maybe, yes, you will see that 3.5%. But on an STRV, you wouldn't even notice 3.5% because it's that much of a smaller number. Remember how we speak about percentages and it goes up being a bigger number? Well, the STRV inside Siege mode has such a low dispersion that 3.5% doesn't really make much difference. So I would just avoid this, pick something else. There are plenty of other perks in here. The gunner one is actually one of the better ones for the perk system because I feel like a lot of them are valid kind of apart from concentration because you just have to wait 3 seconds for it and if you move it's just automatically gone. Next up is quick aiming. Very simple one. Increases the aiming speed by 2.5% and your turret traverse speed by 2.5%. That's it. There's no prerequisites. It is just as simple as that. So if you do have a tank with very long aim time, I'm looking at you, Barask, this one's actually very, very useful. Is it a must-have on most tanks? Probably not, considering that you have a lot of other perks that you can choose from. However, again, as I said, if it does have a long aiming time, it's very useful. And finally, Armourer, and this is probably one of the best perks in the game, at least for me personally, because it reduces the RNG. Currently, the RNG is plus minus 25%. This perk will get rid of 5% plus minus, so you would actually have plus minus 20% RNG on your vehicle. And it will decrease the gun dispersion by 1.5%, all the time, permanently. So this perk, in my opinion, is a 100% must-have on every tank in the game. It doesn't matter if it's a light tank, it doesn't matter if it's a heavy tank. Pick this because you are getting less RNG and a more accurate gun. Okay, it's only 1.5%. However, you're getting a lot nicer RNG overall. And another fun fact, Armourer does actually work with vents, everything else. So you can actually get plus minus whatever it might be when it's fully maxed out with food, vents, everything else. So even less RNG for your tank. I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and just set up the Type 5 with how I would set it up with what I have remaining. And then we'll have a little look. So obviously Armourer, and then I probably want Deadeye. The Type 5 actually gets pretty decent dispersion as far as I'm aware. So we'll choose that. Now moving on to the driver, we have clutch braking, which is what it's always been. Increases whole traverse speed by 5%. It's okay. Is it worth it over the others? We'll have to wait and see, but I don't think that it's a must-have, because even if you're in a very, very slow turning tank, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. Smooth ride, exactly the same as it used to. This is just like snapshot. However, this is for when you are on the move for the dispersion rather than the turret traverse dispersion. This is okay. It's only 4%. Is it a must-have? Probably not, because most of the time you're going to be then standing still, then you'll wait for it to aim and then do it. Whereas with, say, snapshot, it's a little bit more, you're in where you need to be and then you're turning your turret. Whereas with smooth ride, you're kind of getting to where you need to be, and usually you're not firing on the move that often. And if you are, you only need to really slow down a little bit and then you have the bloom come down. So off-road driving, this got changed slightly. It reduces the speed lost on medium terrain by 5% and the speed loss on the very soft terrain by 100%. So this is probably the one must-have on anything, because it just makes it faster. It makes it better across grass and swamp environments. Especially if you're in a slow tank, maintaining that speed is crucial. Next up, we have reliable placement. This increases the HE shell damage absorption by 10% and decreases the damage received by falling for 30%. I'm not going to lie to you, it's not that useful. In an EBR, maybe, because you are jumping around and stuff like that. And especially in EBR races and stuff like that, that if you've seen on Twitch, this would actually be very, very useful. But in normal World of Tanks gameplay, I don't really think that it's that useful. I'm also not aware if this affects artillery, because it used to be, because RT still has the old HE mechanic where it can splash and stuff like that. I'm not too sure how this will affect it, and it's only 10% anyway. I don't think it's worth it at all. I wouldn't even bother putting this on any vehicle. I think this is a kind of useless perk, or in the best case scenario, a very, very niche perk. I don't think that this is very useful, and I wouldn't advise taking it. Controlled impact, however, very useful. You're just getting less damage received by ramming and more damage that you give by ramming. And it also protects your suspension by 50% when you do ram someone. Honestly, out of all of these so far, off-road driving and controlled impact, and probably smooth ride maybe, but I mean, at the same time, you're going to already be taking Rise and Arms repairs, so, and maybe even concealment, depending on the tank. These two, 100% I would take. Off-road driving and controlled impact. Just because when you do ram someone, which actually happens a lot more often than you think, it will also protect you from when someone just rams into you and then you get tracked. Or you ram someone very, very slightly and you get tracked. This will then help that out. So I'd definitely say controlled impact, get it. It will help you out quite a bit. And finally, engineering. This increases the both top forward speed and reverse speed by 1 km/h, which honestly isn't really that much, but it's fine, I guess. But it will also reduce the penalty for a damaged engine by 20%. So if you are in a German heavy tank, this is quite useful. And to be honest with you, with the rest of the perks how they are, 1, 2, 3, Brothers in Arms repairs, maybe concealment, and you've got yourself your perks. If you weren't going to choose concealment, then smooth ride as your 6th, and you're pretty good. So that is what I'm going to be selecting for my driver. Next up, we have the radio operator. Now, this one is a little bit special because usually this will be mixed in with another crew member. So realistically, you can only take 3 from the bottom here, normally, which, to be honest with you, is actually okay. First up, you have situational awareness. Everybody should take this. If you don't, you're a moron. It just gives you more view range by 3%. We've already spoken about percentages and stuff. You're then getting even more view range. No matter what tank you are in, pick situational awareness. It's exactly the same reasoning as recon, but it gives you even more view range than recon does. Next up, we have side by side, and this may seem very good because what it does is increase the crew efficiency bonus by 2.5% when you're within 50 meters of a friendly vehicle that is the same class. However, 50 meters, you could sniff them at 50 meters. That's how close you need to be to your friendly vehicle to be able to get this perk going. And most of the time, you're just not within that distance. Maybe for heavy tanks, it would maybe be useful. But then as soon as you don't go within 50 meters, it's then just a completely wasted perk. again, maybe for tank destroyers, if you're sniping at the back. If you go in a platoon a lot, then okay, I can see the appeal for this. But again, I don't think that it's that useful compared to the rest of the perks that are on offer here. And you also need to take into consideration, you can only choose 3 from here, usually, because they'll be your bonus perks, as you will be they'll be on the commander or your gunner or whatever else might be your radio operator. So I don't think that side by side is good, and I don't think it's worth it. Next up we have jamming, and this decreases the time that your vehicle remains spotted by 1 second. Honestly, this isn't really that worth it in the random queue. However, if you obviously saw the clip at the start with the TVP in Onslaught, it's quite broken in that regard. So if you are playing Onslaught, pick this, take this. It's so good to just get that all the way down. You use radio as well to then decrease the time that you're spotted, and it goes all the way down to, I think it's minus 3.25 or 3.26 that you're spotted for, which means that you're only spotted for 0.74 seconds, which, as you saw, the TVP was getting unspotted during its intro clip. So for randoms, no, don't take it, okay? It's not worth it. But for Onslaught, take it, especially during this season when it's free to demount or reset, all your crew. Take it when you're getting very, very close to the end of Onslaught or when the time is about to run out, then take it off. Signal interception, this one is kind of good, actually. For randoms, I would actually kind of recommend this because this decreases the time that you get the 6th Sense notification by 0.75 seconds. And obviously with everything else, all the other bonuses running, vents, food, everything else, you can get that to above 1 second. So you're then getting that notification 2 seconds instead of 3 seconds, which if you're a new player as well, it's very, very useful. But even if you're not a new player and you're just playing in your light tanks, this is so good because you're then not sitting in the open for 3 whole seconds before you then realize you're spotted. And that's the main thing. A lot of the time, players who are experienced in the game know when they're getting spotted and they can then just evade it. The only time that you can't is when you're a light tank and you're sitting in a bush and then all of a sudden you get spotted. That's usually where a lot of people die. If you can see an enemy coming at you and you think, okay, he's probably going to spot me in a second, then you kind of know to evade it. But if you're just sitting in a bush and then suddenly you just get lit up, at least then you've got an extra second to get away. So it can be useful. I kind of like it for the random queue. I wouldn't really use it competitively or anything like that, but I like this quite a bit. Communications expert. This increases the crew efficiency bonus by 2.5% if the amount of damage you have assisted exceeds your initial hit points. Oh, right. If you're a light tank, you take this. Always. Without fail. It is a default 100% you should take this perk. Because what this does, you sit in bush, you spot, as soon as your spotting has gone above whatever your hit points is, you then get boosted by 2.5%, which is just mental. So if you are playing a light tank or a medium tank that has the spotting capability, take it. It's so, so good to take this. If you're in a heavy tank, maybe not, especially considering, remember, this is usually baked in as one of your bonus perks and you can only choose 3 of these. So maybe not if you're a heavy tank, but for a light tank and medium tanks that will do spotting, this is 100% necessary. And finally, firefighting. Again, another 100% necessary thing because you might as well just have it. It will increase the fire extinguishing speed by 80%. You no longer take those 1k fire ticks from just getting first shot fired. This is just one of those things that is just a better quality of life feature. It used to be that you needed this on every single crew member. This is now baked into the radio operator. So if I only had to pick 3, if I'm going to be a light tank, I pick these 3. If I'm not going to be a light tank, then I probably pick this. And for Onslaught, I pick this. Now, obviously, the Type 5 gets those 2, and then I have to pick one more, which is then going to be firefighting, because this is probably the best one for a Type 5. And finally, the loader. Now, this, again, is usually baked into one of your bonus perks. So, ideally, or realistically, it will only be 3 that you can choose from here, usually. I know a lot of tanks do have loaders, more so than radio operators. However, a lot of the time, it will only be 3 that you can choose from. So starting out with Adrenaline Rush, this will decrease the gun loading time by 5% if your vehicle has under 25% hit points. It used to be, I think, under 10% hit points or something like that. And now they've upped it, so it's got buffed to 25%. Again, if you remember with the whole emergency, where this will get buffed if you take damage by 5%, and then you could go and get your reload time buffed by another 5%, you then get an insanely good reload time reduction as soon as you take damage if you go below 25%. So this is nice to have, although there are others that are in here that are probably even better. Safe stowage, although it's not a 100% yes, you should take it. It is one of those perks where if you do have a tank which has a tendency of getting its ammo rack knocked out, just take it. It's better to take this than to not take this. If you are looking for your final perk and you think, okay, what can I take? Just take safe stowage. It's your safest bet. More so than adrenaline rush, more so than close combat, perfect charge, or anything like that. Take safe stowage. It will help you out the most. Another thing to note about the loaders is that because there's usually 2 loaders in a tank, or some of the time there's 2 loaders in the tank, you will have to pick them being exactly the same. So for example, I have 2 loaders in the Type 5. You can't quite see, but if we just quickly get rid of it, I have 2 loaders right here. I would have to pick exactly the same perks because of the fact that they average out over the percent that they have. So it doesn't matter what one I pick in here, I have to pick them exactly the same. Honestly, they should have just removed the 2 loaders. Like, just make it so there's only 1 loader on the tanks. I don't know why they kept this in, because it would do exactly the same thing, but it's just annoying that it has 2 loaders now. So if you are thinking about training any of these and you do have 2 loaders, you're going to have to train them exactly the same. Otherwise, they're going to be mismatched and only the average value is counted. Next up, we have intuition. This decreases the time of changing the shells type by 60%. Now, I think that this actually got slightly nerfed because I thought that it was about 80% that it used to be. But either way, intuition is very, very useful, especially on tanks that have multiple ammo types that are useful. For example, if you have AP, heat, and then HE, and they're all very, very good, then you can quickly pick and choose between them. Is it a 100% must-have? I would say yes, if you have a tank that's like that. If you don't have a tank that's like that, and for example, it might be AP and then APCR, and realistically, you're only going to be firing the AP round or APCR rounds because they're just flat out better, then maybe you can get away without intuition, but still, that quick switching into HE when you need it is super nice to have. Next up, we have perfect charge. This increases the shell velocity by 10%. I won't lie to you, it's probably not worth it. It's nice to have, don't get me wrong, but out of the rest of them, would I choose this over intuition? No. Would I choose this over safe stowage? No, probably not. Unless it's something that already has a very, very fast shell velocity, then maybe I'll take it. If a Leo 1, for example, I'm taking this on it. Because you then get like 1.8k shell velocity on the premium round and 1.6 on the standard round. It's super, super nice. You can almost like hit scam people with it. And the Blitzkaviska, for example, as well. You get like 2k shell velocity. It's mental. Or 2.2k. It's absolutely mental how fast the shell velocity is. It's one of those things where it is a buff to the super fast shell velocities, but not so much for the slow shell velocities. Because if you think about it, a VKK, which has 607 shell velocity on its heat round, is only going to be buffed to 667 or whatever it is. You're not going to notice that. Like, it's you're really not going to notice the difference of an extra 60 meters a second. Whereas you would notice the difference of an extra 200 or something, right? It's one of those things. So not completely useless, very fun, but not a must-have, I would say. Close combat decreases the gun loading time by 2.5% at distances of less than 50 meters from the enemy. Now, it's one of those things where you think to yourself, this is great, until you realize how close 50 meters is. As we've already mentioned with side by side, 50 meters, as I said, you could sniff the enemy or your teammate. It is that close, meaning that it's hardly ever going to be activated. If you're in a Polish TD, even then, you're not going to be within 50 meters, or hardly ever within 50 meters, because most of the time, you're going to die if you're that close. They'll have your weak spot, they'll spam you with heat or whatever, and you'll just die. So I would say, again, this perk is kind of like a bit of a gimmick. It's not worth taking unless you're in Onslaught. The reason being is that this activates within 50 meters of an enemy vehicle. Now, Onslaught actually got a 25 meter proxy range. So does that mean that this gets activated within 50 meters, but they're not spotted? So once they leave that 50 meters, that means then they've gone further away. So you could actually use this perk as a proxy range within Onslaught for 50 meters. Although you wouldn't technically spot them, you would know they're there. So no, I don't recommend close combat at all. And finally, ammo tuning. This decreases the min pen roll and the min damage roll of your tank, meaning that it'll be increased by 2%. So on top of whatever else you've got on Armorer for the potential damage range, if you then use this, you're then not being able to roll. I mean, that would be minus 22% is the lowest that you could go. On top of already that minus 20% or whatever you've got it to with vents and everything else. So even less RNG. I would choose this on every tank. It just makes the tank better. So for the Type 4, obviously Brothers in Arms and repairs. Then I want ammo tuning. I mean, the Type 4 does get ammo racked quite often now and again, which can be an issue. But I think I'm going to go with intuition. And then what I'll do is I'll just train that up a little bit, then get safe stowage. It should be absolutely fine. So I think that's what I'll do, as safe stowage will be my next one. And there we go. That is everything you need to know about the new perk system. Hopefully this has helped you out. Hopefully you are now getting a better grip of how everything works and what everything does. And you can go ahead and choose your perks that you would like. Let me know your combinations below and what you think. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.